use it for and how it holds up and everything after what we use it for on. So we've got that, and then at the end of this, we have Tyler jumping in from Powertank. We did something different than we usually do. We tried struts on something. Now you're running struts on yours, so we're gonna talk a little bit about that, but the practicality of them. And why I think there's some places to use them and why I do think that a coilover is gonna be better in some other areas. All right, so talking about this build, this is obviously the new Alter Ego. Been talking about it a lot in a lot of different interviews. I'm on like 47 of these. It's been amazing. So on this build, we really, really wanted to use it on the cage because of all the TIG welding that Jason did. But we had a theme and a look we wanted to hold up on this thing. So maybe one day they're gonna come out with an OD green for me.
We've got a lot of stuff coming.
Maybe one day, maybe one day. All right, so on this guy, what we did use it on because of practicality is the frame, the engine cage, and the axles. Now on the frame on this, we have black, and on the links, it is charcoal, and on the axles, it is charcoal. That's their new color. I would say that there's no difference in the sprayability, the look, the feel of it than black or the traditional gray you guys have had forever. So it's just up there with like that par level, right? Of why you get Steel-it and why it works so well.
Right, so all of the coatings that we have, all the black, the steel gray, the charcoal, and even the dove gray and the light gray, they all spray very similarly. There's not really too much difference other than the pigment, obviously, and the amount of stainless that's in it. So it doesn't really change how it sprays. And that also correlates to spraying it as a liquid out of a gallon.
Yeah.
When you're spraying it with a gun, it comes out the exact same way and it blends nicely. So it's the same exact coating. It's mixed in the same vat. All the batches come out the exact same way. So that's one of the nice things is you can use the touch up with an aerosol what you've used and sprayed with a gun. So it's the exact same thing.
Same gloss level, same, it's all the same finish, so to say.
Exactly.
The one thing I did that I think I noticed is the charcoal gray shows a little bit more of the definition in the parts.
Right.
But not as much as like the lighter grays do, right?
Sure.
So if you're a guy and you're building something and like, let's say you have TIG welds and you have that stuff, and you might have some things that you don't want everything to show, but you want some to show, charcoal's a good look at for that because you're gonna have some of those finishes, but it's not so bright that it's gonna pull your eyes to it.
Right, exactly. And one of the really big pros of using Steel-it is powder, like as you can see even on the cage here, powder covers up your welds. One of the big benefits with Steel-it is you use Steel-it, like you look at a weld here, you're able to see that weld fully. You can see if that weld has a crack or if it has a defect or if you need a repair, you can see it clearly through the Steel-it. You don't have to dig for it and wait till something fails. It's one of the pros, in serviceability with.
Correct. And that does have 2 to 3 coats on it that we sprayed on this, so you know what I mean. That is pretty stacked on. You can still see the the dimples in the weld. So you are right in that aspect. The biggest thing about Steel-it though, it took me a long time to believe this, and it is true. You can weld to it after you lay it. Now, one of the things to keep in mind is you got to wait 7 days. Like, don't just think you can just go spray it and then 24 hours later weld on it. That doesn't work.
Right.
But even Jason, on one point on yours, you had to put some new stuff on your axles and on your cage, and we TIGged right to it. And Jason was like, there's no way you can TIG to this. He's over here polishing the metal basically to make it apply the TIG so there's no contaminants in the weld surface and everything. And he's like, no, there's no way, you can't do it, you can't do it. And we're like, yes, you can. He's like, no, you can't. And then he walks over there and he does it and he's like,
it's funny because TIG is such a meticulous and clean process that anybody that is proficient at it, like Jason, that can TIG weld, for days and do a really good job at doing it, it kind of blows their mind once they actually weld to it to see how it reacts. You don't get a huge burn back. You don't compromise the entire coating of everything that you have. You don't have to send everything out to repowder, to touch it up, or to make a repair, like I was saying, the weld.
And you don't have like a blotchy looking, when you weld something with Steel-it, and I think this is the biggest thing to explain to people, let's say that you have to change a mount, or you need to fix a mount that a weld cracked.
Right.
You can basically just make sure the surface is clean, wipe it off, wire brush a little bit maybe, hit it with your welder, TIG or MIG, then you can take it, wipe it down again, wipe anything off you might have created, and then just lay your Steel-it over it, and it lays down on it like it was originally coated that way. That is the biggest thing I think that is the biggest thing to me is that it doesn't look like you did it again.
Right.
It looks like it was the first time that way.
So the stainless in the coating, it's super dense, and that allows it to self-level really nicely. So when
Yeah.
you lay it on, it's supposed to go at like 8 mils wet film thickness, which is pretty thick, and it dries to 1.5.
Yeah.
So it smooths out and levels out really nicely, and that's what helps it blend in. If you have to touch something up, or you've got a scratch or repair or a new part, you can actually spray right over it, and it doesn't look splotchy and pieced together.
Yeah.
That's one of the differences between like powder coat, or
Yeah.
not even powder coat, but just cheaper paints. Like
Yeah.
it's gonna look pieced together if you do that.
Yeah. The problem with powder coat is you can't just powder coat this corner. You
Right.
have to sandblast the entire thing and powder coat everything. So a lot of people have asked, how does it hold up, right?
Right.
Now, when it goes on, it looks flawless, it looks beautiful. But how about after a couple years? How about after a couple years with me? That's a whole nother conversation, right? I think everybody looks a little worn out after a couple years with me.
Sure.
So let's go here and look at Rock Buggy. All right. Now, in my personal opinion, I have beat on this thing. I have rubbed it against things. I have hurt it. I have done a little touch-ups here and there, obviously, because we're at SEMA. But for the most part, this is exactly how it looked when I sprayed it, right? And yeah, it has 2 years of out in the sun. It has 2 years of East Coast. It has 2 years of Moab. It has 2 years of the desert, King of the Hammers, all these things on it, but it doesn't look what I would say like a normal paint job would look, right? Even our powder coat looks a little bit different than it did when we first sprayed it. And you know what I mean? And even like the anodized on the gold on the shocks looks a little bit. But to me, the Steel-it looks relatively the same.
Right, the Steel-it doesn't change very much, and that's one of the testaments to what we try to do. Is the biggest benefit to the coating, other than the weldability, serviceability, is the anti-corrosive benefits.
Yeah.
So basically, when you're using Steel-it, you're layering stainless flake over top of the metal. It bonds to that metal and creates a layer of stainless that keeps everything out.
Yeah.
So you keep any kind of rust, any kind of corrosion, you keep all that out. It's UV stable, and you know you get something that looks like this after 2 years. I mean, you have zero rust issues. You don't have any kind of rust or corrosion like coming through. You know, even if you did have to touch it up, you can, and it's gonna
look like it did, even though I touched it up.
It's gonna reseal it and look fine.
Yeah. Now I think the other big thing on that is a lot of people on the West Coast, like me, take it for granted on how your vehicle weathers. Before working with you guys, I would take like the old Gridlock or one of our rigs, I'd park it out at Jeep Beach for a week, then I'd come home and it would be like rust
Welcome
everywhere.
To the East Coast.
Yeah, like I hate your weather and I hate your rusting.
Yeah.
But anyways, it holds up. You know what I mean? These rigs see at least 1 to 2 trips a month all over the country, including the East Coast, West Coast, middle of the country, everywhere you can think of, and they all still look new. And it's funny, like Chase at East Coast is like, how does your stuff always look good? Like, do you just, and I'm not Bill Adair, like I ain't breaking out the paintbrush every time this thing goes out. Like, we take care of our rigs, but it is working with quality parts and partners.
If you use quality stuff, it's easier to maintain, it's easier to manage, you know, it's gonna look better in the long run.
Yeah. And look, you can't say it, I'll say it. There's a lot of things popping up that's a lot like Steel-it, but it's not Steel-it. And I'll tell you what, like you look at the price of Steel-it, it's like, it's no different than you're looking at a price of a tire or a supercharger. Like, do you really want to go to Temu and get a brand? Like, no, you want to work with something that is good quality, because the last thing you want, whether it's something like this or something like this or something like that, you want something that's going to hold up. You don't want to be 200 miles in from the nearest thing and have stuff breaking, but that also goes with your surfacing. We work with Patriot Liner, we work with Steel-it, we work with things that work really well and they last. Because the last thing you want is all of your stuff to fall apart because it's been rusting from the inside out and you didn't know it.
Right.
And that's one of the cool things I think about Steel-it is it does envelope it like Patriot Liner, so it protects it, right?
Right.
And it is like I don't think you've ever done testing, but I've done it. I've sprayed Steel-it on something, and then I Patriot Liner over the top of it, and it worked to me.
That's how I did my entire body. If we want to move over here and look at that.
Yeah, for sure.
So the entire body of the Jeep started with the tub getting dustless blasted.
Yeah.
So we prepped by doing that. You know,
dustless blasted is basically like sandblasting it.
Yeah, it's sandblasting, but it's less harsh. You know, the sand's
like
not
you're
gonna,
not pitting it.
Yeah, the sand's not going to punch through.
Yeah.
Where you got a body with sheet metal stuff, it could punch through. So dustless blasting is a little more gentle, But for the prep for Steel-it, it's perfect because it takes off any kind of rust.
Yeah.
Takes off any kind of old paint that's on
Surface
there.
issues, things like that. Yeah.
And it preps it. It gives it a good rough profile that Steel-it needs. So this body was dustless blasted, and then went through, cleaned it with acetone, got everything, all the oils and grease off of it, and then 3 coats of Steel-it with our steel gray, and that came out of a gallon. So we used 2 gallons on the body and Patriot liner right over top of it. So the Steel-it it holds up tremendously. So, I mean, it's a great prep for any kind of finish coating like Patriot liner.
And your tub is what, 2 to 3 years old now?
Oh, easily. Yeah. We're easily at the two year mark of when the body was done, and it still looks great. I mean, obviously, I've had to touch up a couple things here and there just between the shows and the crawls.
He's like Alex. He likes trees. They hug trees a lot.
East Coast stuff.
Yeah.
East Coast stuff. So it does hold up great, and it is a good prep for Patriot liner. They work great in conjunction with each other.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Well, anything else you want to talk about? How about new colors?
Yeah. So let's go back to the back of the Jeep here. We'll show you the colors that we do have out now. So currently, people really just think we have the 2 colors. Those, the steel gray and the black, they're our most popular. Steel gray's been around 50 years this year. So we've got all these out here. Our charcoal, like we use.
So this is their signature. This has been out, I think, the longest, right?
Yeah.
And then, so that's one that is something that you've always been able to get from Steel-it. And then this is the other one you've always been able to get from Steel-it. So to kind of help you understand, this is the new charcoal. It's a mixture of these 2. And then these are the 2 new ones he's talking about, Dove Gray and Light Gray. So these 3 are the new ones.
Yeah, those came out this year. A lot of people still don't know that we carry the new colors, but these are the new 3 that we've launched this year, and we've got a lot invested in R&D this year with some more formulations, more colors. People ask us how come it's taking you so long to get colors out, and the biggest reason is the stainless steel that we put in the coating. When it's raw, it's black, so it's hard to get color, like a bright color, out of black.
Yeah.
And that plays a big factor in it, and making sure you have enough steel in there to protect the product.
Well, not only that, but like another problem, that everyone's having conversations with, right, is beyond that, well, then how do you keep it price affordable, right?
Exactly.
Like one of the things that people complain about all the time is the cost to steel it.
Right.
But again, there's R&D that goes to it. There's actual scientific stuff that goes into it of creating, spraying, creating, spraying.
And getting it to spray and do what you need to consistently. That's the biggest thing. And we've put a lot of time into it. And everything that we've launched, it's consistent. That's what we've put a lot of time into. And that brings us to some of the new stuff that we've got ready to launch. This stuff will be coming out later this year. We've got a true white, as well as a safety yellow. These are going to be launching later by the end of the year.
So that's like the light gray, if that helps you understand the color pigment change.
Yeah, some people call the light gray white. They just say, oh, you came out with a white, but it's not a true white. This is a true white and it's a safety rated yellow. So a lot of the industrial people are using it, and we've got a lot of other stuff that'll be launching first quarter, second quarter next year.
That's obviously like a Rockstar. So yeah, it's like the yellow's there, like it looks good.
So a lot of new stuff coming.
Cool. Well, awesome. I dig it.
Yeah.
All right, well, cool. How can we find out more about Steel-it?
Yeah, so steel-it.com. Go check out our website. Check out, all of our colors are on there. You can see me. I've used Steel-it for years, and I continue to use it. And any kind of new products that I do, we're doing.
One of the cool things is you're obviously one of our ambassadors, but you've been an enthusiast in the Jeep market for quite a while.
Right.
And you actually work for Steel-it now. So you have enthusiasts that are actually working with the brand, so they know how everything works. You know what I mean? And then they're also involved in the communities and trying to do whatever they can to support. And that's, to me, that's always the recipe for success. If you take a suit and tie, so to say, and you throw them in this and they're not a part of the world, it's very hard to understand what the enthusiast wants or needs.
Right.
So it's cool to see the mixture between you guys of making that all work.
Exactly. It's a little bit of testing real world application and then bringing somebody in that knows that.
Yeah.
And that's worked really well for us.
Yep.
You know, it's been a fun job.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Bink does a good job on the go fast stuff in the desert, right? So now we got this going here, and so now it's kind of more things are covered, which is cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, awesome. All right. So that's gonna wrap it up with Steel-it. Appreciate you, dude. Thanks for coming. All right. Now the next guy we're bringing in here is a titan of a man. Everyone knows him. Everyone loves him. And if you don't, well, you're just not a nice person. It's Tyler Powertank. This guy, in one way, shape, or form, has probably saved everybody on the trail. Probably me more than anyone else. I think at one point I might have even used the power tank to put out a fire. But I know I've done a lot of like reseeding with 46s and stuff.
46s,
I think that's like when our love started, right?
Yeah, we still use that photo of the gridlock on 46s in Moab with the high lift under the slider.
Go figure, gridlock was broke. Dennis is laughing behind the camera right now. It might be shaking. All right, so we started playing in the world of ORIs a little bit. This guy obviously uses ORIs on his, but the Jeep behind you is on ORIs as well. Now, the reason that we jumped into the world of ORIs a little bit this year is because John, who owns the JLU, the Dynatrac JLU behind us, that Jeep is a dual purpose Jeep, right? Now, the great thing about an ORI that I would say is it's not gonna have the unloading that a coilover is gonna have when you're going on obstacles. Right? The other pro to an ORI that I would say over a coilover is the availability to adjust it on the vehicle.
Yes.
So when you have a coilover, let's say you add 1,500 pounds of camping gear, you now have to either change your spring rates or deal with a ride that's not the best.
Or sagging or lower
Correct, rubbage, whatever it is, right? So those are the main reasons. Now the other thing I think is that an ORI has an inner and outer chamber, and you can use the nitrogen chambers in those to actually adjust so you don't have to use a sway bar, technically, right? So you can be out on a trail and you're not gonna have the major leans or flops or things like that. It's also not gonna wanna push you off of rocks. If you're coming down things, it's not gonna wanna unload and push you down it. But there's also some things that why coilovers are pro, and I'm not gonna get into those right now because we're here more to talk about your product with ORI. So one of the problems is though, okay, cool, now I got these ORIs, they're on my rig, how do I adjust them? Problem is there's not a lot of ways to adjust them if you're not a shock servicing shop, right? Ta-da, save the day.
Even
Tyler.
then, So I guess this is our new Shock Boss kit.
Now you get everything with this, right?
So let's open it up.
Yep.
So we call this our V2. It's in a brand new case. We've had our V1 and it was for coilovers and bump stops and things like that. And then we started getting to ORIs. Our buddies started putting them on their full body Jeeps and they just started picking up and the technology kind of matured. I think that's what was holding it back a little bit was
technology.
And so they've really stepped up their game to really be competitive against coilovers on street-driven rigs, wheeled rigs, everything. So we had a soft case, now it's all in a hard case, and we have our new dual fill strut inflator gauge. And so this is really the key to the system. So
I feel like you're a sniper going to war right now with this, like it's all compact and James Bondish.
You have to put it together a little bit, but that's because we wanted it to be compact, but have the flexibility of having 12 feet of hose. So you get 2 hoses. And so 2 hoses, they're each 6 feet.
Okay.
So you get 12 feet, and so you can go right to left, and that's typically how folks are gonna set them up. You can operate it as a single with the on-off valve like that. And then we have a 1,000 PSI digital gauge. This is our optional Pro Series gauge. Standard is 800 PSI analog. It still uses our billet body that we've always been using, but we just added that dual fill, new gauges, and all the other same great features like this super fine micro adjust knob. So you could really just fine tune your pressures. We'll go back to that in a second, but let's just quickly go over all the rest of the components. Get a Schrader valve extension. Sometimes things are hard to get to. Schrader valves are hard to get to. power wrench. This is for the filler that's underneath. You get a shoulder strap for this 72 cubic inch nitrogen bottle. And so this just kind of frees up your hand and lets you manipulate things.
Yep.
And what's different about this and our standard shock boss for coilovers is this. This is our extreme pressure hose assembly. This goes on top of the bottle. Now our bottle has a step down regulator. So whatever your bottle pressure is, 2,500, 2,000, it'll step it down to 800 PSI in this inlet or outlet.
Okay.
And that's what's coming into here. So you have 800 PSI to play with. And that's why it's so important to have that really fine adjust knob so you're not just blowing seals and everything.
So now, quick question, while you keep going, but why, how much will this fill? Like how much shock-wise or strut-wise can you get out of that?
Obviously, it's going to depend on how heavy your rig is, how much nitrogen you're adding, how long it is. But we've seen from our experience, we've been able to do a full set of 4 at least 2 times.
Okay.
And these are like
so very like in line with this, right?
Yeah.
Like you have 37s, 40s, you can probably get 2 fill-ups out of this.
Yeah.
So it's very much the same. So if you're running this and this, then you know that you're gonna have to change these out around the same time.
Yeah. Well, that one you should be able to get 16 tires, but
yeah.
But yeah, it's limited, and you just kind of have to keep that in the back of your mind.
Yeah. But honestly, you're not, unless you're really changing your setup a lot, you're not going through this that much.
Correct. Yes. And that's going from, fully collapsed and then all the way back up. That's the volume of air.
Not just like adding a little bit.
Yeah, a little fine tuning, that's totally fine. You could do that all day.
Yep.
So underneath in the second layer, that's the same shoulder strap, instructions, a couple extra seals, and then the filler. So this connects to your bottle.
Mm-hmm. So that's how they fill it later, like when you go somewhere?
Correct, yeah. So this whole kit still requires you to rent an N2 tank from your welding shop. And that goes into any standard CGA 580 N2 bottle, and then you're going to fill that. And
now, quick question,
yes, sir.
Just for me: if you're not someone who's going to go out and get an N2 tank, right? Mm-hmm. Can you go to a nitrogen shop and have this bottle filled? Would they fill it?
It really depends on the shop.
Yeah.
The more technical guys are going to be able to do it. The shops that have big staff that are just hiring guys off the street, And
I guess my next question is: would you want to? Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you're at this point and you're doing this, would you want to? And that's where I'm going at with that is like, would you want to not have your own tank to be able to do this yourself a little bit? Because then, if you are going somewhere last minute, it's easier to find someone who's going to fill these than try to fill these. Right. So it's probably better to have something like a collection point to be able to fill this yourself than trying to hunt this down on a Friday night when you're headed to the Rubicon.
Yeah.
If that's like, and that's where I was going at with that.
Yeah. And then the other thing too is, this is a fully portable kit. Take it with you, tune on the trail, take care of emergencies if you blow a seal or something. If you're just setting it up in your garage, you can just get an N2 bottle and go straight to our SIG without the full kit.
So all of this will still connect to another bottle, right? Yeah.
Question.
Yeah.
Can you fill that with that?
So
would you guys ever build one of these to fill with a nitrogen so that like this is their bigger tank?
It's a CO2 tank. So the question really is, would you fill your ORI with CO2? And I would say there's no reason not to. Nitrogen and CO2 are
like
both
the same. They're the one of the closest things, right?
Right. Yeah, they're both dry, inert gases. There's no water vapor in it, and they actually do have similar thermal expansion properties. Even though this compresses into a liquid at a lower pressure than, say, N2, in a shock or a strut, when it compresses, you're actually adding heat, which prevents it from liquefying.
Yep.
And liquefying as in liquid CO2, not water. Again, right, you just want a dry vapor in there to act as a spring, act as your...
So would you guys, I guess my question is, would you guys ever sell a big enough bottle like this that you could use this to fill that, like a nitrogen bottle?
Like, no, we will not, we don't have a plan to sell a nitrogen bottle like that.
Okay.
Because it's too easy to just rent it from your supplier. And typically, because this is the portable kit, this is what's really nice, looks good on the rig.
Yeah.
The N2 bottle, that's just sitting in the garage.
Yep, for sure. But yeah, to get yourself off the trail, something happens and you had this setup and this was empty, you could still use this.
Yeah.
Yep. Now, would you want to drain the shock completely, or could you mix these?
I wouldn't worry about it.
So you could mix those if something happened.
Yeah, so the ORI to us is still kind of new. We're still experimenting with it. But as for coilovers, a couple years ago in the NORA race, we were chasing one of our drivers, bent a shock shaft, lost all the pressure. We were able to bend the shock back, but the chase truck with the nitrogen was at the next stop. So the chase truck we were in had a power tank. We filled the shock with CO2, didn't tell the driver, made it. He actually took first place on that leg of the NORA. Next day, we were doing service, everything. Guy comes around with a power tank to fill the shock. And JT says, whoa, that's power tank, that's not an N2. He's like, JT, you raced all yesterday CO2. You didn't know. He's like, okay,
yeah.
And we put it on shock dynos, CO2 versus N2,
Yeah.
and the difference is negligible.
Yeah. So it's definitely something that can get you off the trail for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, well, cool.
Oh, one more thing I wanted to mention that makes ours different is on the other end of the hose, every shock tool you see, whether it's for ORIs or coilovers, is going to have this no air loss chuck. You can screw it onto the Schrader valve and then operate the pin and open and close that chuck independently. Everyone uses an aviation style, which has a copper seal, and you have to crank it down with a wrench. And then you have a T up here, which is really annoying to use. This is our PT shock chuck. We have a long nose and a short nose version. And it's operated with a thumb nut, and we have a Delrin seal instead of a copper seal. So it's so much easier to use. And these are the tools that are used by shock tuners, shock builders, and race tubes.
Awesome. Well, cool. Well, there you have it. Look, for years now, Powertank has made all of our lives easier, airing up and airing down, not having to deal with noisy, loud compressors that take forever. Because everybody knows when you're done wheeling, you just want to go get some food because you're hungry.
Yep.
Typically me. But why wouldn't they make our lives easier with shocks too, right? Or struts, you know what I mean? So it's cool to see this. It's cool to see innovation always. You and your dad kill it all the time. Hope you guys enjoyed the live. We have Sema Live we're getting ready to do, so if you guys want to go jump on that, it's going to be at 4:30 or a little bit earlier, I'm sounding like, on the Sema Live. And they're going to be doing a walkthrough on all the builds with us. Catch you guys there.
Thanks, Nick.
Anytime, buddy.